Welcome to the Preserving Family Podcast. The purpose of this podcast is to equip you to gain insight, information, and inspiration to help you protect, teach, and guide your family during these turbulent times. Our goal is to provide tools and resources to help you strengthen and preserve your own marriages and families. Now here are your hosts, Dr. Mark and Janie Ogletree.
Well, everyone, we are so grateful to be with you today because we are excited that we get to talk about Elder Holland again, especially in his role as a husband and father. And Janie, we've missed you. You've been gone for a little while.
I have. It has been a crazy holiday season.
Yeah.
Besides all the holidays, we've had 2 new grandbabies, which have been a total joy and blessing. 2 baby granddaughters.
Yeah.
So hopefully they'll be besties one day, and they're both just beautiful and healthy and gorgeous, and their mamas are doing good, so all is well.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, since you said the holidays, I mean, it started with Thanksgiving, and then we had a conference in Samoa, and that was a life-changing, cool experience, but we haven't even, I think it's been so busy, we haven't even talked about that with each other.
No, we didn't even have time to process how cool that trip to Samoa. So if anybody has the opportunity to go to Samoa, Western Samoa, we highly recommend it.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Super cool. And then we jumped right into another trip to Dallas because we thought one of our grandbabies was going to be born that week, but they postponed it because, anyway, they were too full with the holidays and everything. We ended up going back home, having Christmas with some of our kids here. Then went back to Dallas. Anyway, it's just been crazy.
It's been a little bit crazy. It's been a little bit crazy. So we could tell everyone. So our goal for 2026 is?
My word this year is simplify. 25 for us was an insane year. Just super crazy. So hopefully this year will be a little more chill.
Yeah.
We're trying to learn the word no. We're trying to learn, to not overextend ourselves and try to balance better.
Yeah, just to kind of not go overboard. So in saying that we're not going to go overboard, here's our first fun overboard thing we're going to do, right? Which is we do want to let everyone know that we do tours with Murdoch Travel, and we do have an awesome church history trip planned for June the 3rd through the 12th. So that first kind of week or so of June. And that trip will take us all the way from the Palmyra area in upstate New York through Ohio, down to Missouri and up to Illinois, and
Nauvoo and all that area.
Yeah, it's gonna be awesome. And the point of us telling you that is there are still a few seats left, and so if you wanted to get on, you probably could just email us at my normal email, which is just OgletreeMD, so OGLETREEMD @gmail.com, and we can point you the right direction on where to learn more about that trip. Anyway,
it's through Morris Murdoch Travel. They're a great company.
They do a great job, don't they?
Just are impeccable. Just a great company to work with. No worries, no scares, no getting ripped off with them. They've been in business for years. They're just have the greatest staff and crew. So
yeah, they're awesome. We've done this with several companies, and we have loved Morris Murdoch for sure. Everything's top of the line. So, well, anyway,
Mark, as we jump in to Elder Holland's teachings today, I just have to give a little cute shout out that one of our new grandbabies, well, they're both Darling, and one of their middle names is Darling, which I love. But the second baby's middle name is Holland, and they were in the hospital debating what to name her, Elder Holland passed away, and it was a no-brainer because of how much we all as a family loved and respected and admired and cherished Elder Holland and all of his teachings, that her middle name is Holland.
Yeah.
After Elder Holland.
That's pretty cool. We love it. And so, I don't know, Janie, how well you remember this. I remember it very vividly because it was our first semester at BYU together. We had just come up from Texas. It was 1984. It was the fall. And the devotional that year was, I think, on September 11th. It was the first devotional, and like with most BYU semesters, it started off with a message from President and Sister Holland. And the message that they delivered was so awesome because they just, right out of the gate, for us anyway, were teaching us about the family, and we were paying close attention. So we're going to try to do something that is probably not in our wheelhouse, but we're going to read to you a portion of this talk. By the way, it was called In the Thick of Life's Urgencies, and so you can look it up. And the text of the entire talk is still there on the BYU devotional site, but the audio and the video cuts this part out, which was the very beginning, and that's why we're going to read it. Otherwise, we would just play it for you. And this is how it went. And I'll read the Jeff part. Janie's going to read the Pat part. We're not claiming to be actors or actresses or anything, but we're going to try it. So here's Elder Holland. You know, this is a very special new year for us because our first child, our oldest son, Matt, entered BYU this fall as a freshman. And then it says, Matt starts to move towards the stand from the audience. This is a new and exciting prospect for us, a new kind of responsibility. And then it says, no, Matthew, no, we're in a devotional right now. I didn't mean for you to come up here. We are speaking to the students. Then it says, Matt keeps coming, goes to Pat, confers with her. She goes to President Holland and whispers. He hands Matt the car keys, and he starts as if to return to his seat. That's Matthew. Now back to Elder Holland, or President Holland. Yes, we know it will be a wonderful experience to share with all of your parents the joys of having a student at BYU. Now it says Matt turns around, walks back to the podium.
And this is, people are starting to giggle now, right? This is supposed to be a funny little thing.
Right.
And this is, by the way, Elder Matt Holland. He's a general authority
He's
now.
a member of the Quorum
and
of
so
70, yeah.
if you're wondering who this is their son then at the time. And then Pat says, Matthew, for Pete's sake, we are trying to hold an assembly here. What on earth do you want? And then Matt pulls Pat away and whispers something in her ear.
And then Elder Holland says, I'm sorry for this interruption. It's embarrassing. Forgive us for just a moment here. And then it says Pat comes back. President Holland pulls out his wallet, hands Matt some money. Matt moves towards his seat. Elder Holland then says, I'm very sorry. As I was saying, I know Matt and all of you are serious about your opportunities here and will be applying yourselves. Now it says Matt is back with a 3x5 card. He hands it to Pat, who reads it and hands it to President Holland. And then Matt returns to his seat. Here's Elder Holland. I can't believe this. Would the brunette on row 78 in Political Science 110 leave her name and telephone number taped to the back of her chair tomorrow? MH on row 83 will make contact. And then Elder Holland says, row 78, row 83, we don't have large freshman classes. We don't have anything that goes past row 6 anyway. And so it just kind of ends with that.
And everybody's laughing and having a fun time with this cute little skit that they did.
and Elder Holland, you know, it's great because once again for us, I think the message for me as a BYU student who had been there on campus for 1 week was that, our President and Sister Holland, they have kids, they have a normal life, they're a normal family, they have some of the same challenges that everyone has, and they're probably going to make it pretty fun.
And I just remember loving having them as our presidents at BYU. They called it the Pat and Jeff show because they always spoke together like this. They'd speak for a minute and then they'd each give a little, but they were just so cute and such a beautiful couple. And everyone just loved.
And it was normal.
Yeah,
you know,
they
it
were
was
just
normal.
They were very self-deprecating. They make fun of themselves. They weren't like preaching. They were just fun and real, and we adored them as our BYU presidents.
I know. So it was so great. So if you want to read another talk that just shows how real this couple was, and it was just so awesome as BYU students once again. The talk was called Some Things That We Have Learned Together. And I will never forget this talk because I know, Janie, you and I were just on the verge of getting married, I think, when it was given. But they just kind of had this little banter back and forth about some of the differences in their marriage.
Yeah, which was fun and made us feel a lot better, you know, as you're getting ready to get married, to see it's okay to have differences.
Right.
But Pat, in this talk, she says, do you want to know what I've told him he does that irritates me the most? This is Pat talking to Elder Holland.
Yeah.
It's that he walks everywhere in a hurry. First 5, then 10, then 50 feet in front of me. I've learned how to just call out and tell him when he gets there, he's going to have to save me a place.
And you can probably relate to that, right, honey? And then Elder Holland, President Holland says, well, as long as we're telling secrets, do you want to know what irritates me? It's that she is always late and that we are therefore always running to get somewhere. With me, first 5, then 10, than 50 feet in front of her.
Sounds again like us, huh? Then she says, we've learned to laugh about that a little and now compromise. I watch the time a little bit better. He slows down a stride or two, and we actually touch fingertips about every other bounce.
See, we love that. And then Elder President Holland, he says, but we don't have everything worked out yet, like room temperatures. I used to joke about LDS scripturalists who worried about the body temperature of translated beings. I don't joke anymore because I now worry seriously about my wife's body temperature. She has an electric blanket on high for 11 months of the year. She suffers hypothermia at the 4th of July picnic. She thaws out from about 2 o'clock to 3:30 on the afternoon of August the 12th. And then it's bundle up time again.
And then Sister Holland says, we ought to talk. He throws the window open every night as if he's Admiral Perry looking for the South Pole. But just let someone suggest a little warm winter morning jog, and he sounds like a wounded Siberian sheepdog. Mr. Health here can't even tie his shoelaces without taking oxygen.
That is good. And then President Holland just kind of finishes that. And as for different backgrounds, it's hard to think that two kids from St. George could have different backgrounds or even any background at all. Anyway.
This would be a fun talk if you have kids getting married or thinking about that point in their life, getting engaged, looking for the right person. I think this would be a really fun talk.
Yeah, it's once again, and it's just them showing their normal side, their human side, and that's like I talked about last time. It's one of the reasons why we love Elder Holland so much is because he's not afraid to open up and just open his soul and just share and let us into that part of his life. Could you imagine any others, just being that specific? And I know he's not an apostle right now when he's talking, but it's just fun that he's just that open and all of us can relate to that, right? Mm-hmm. So really what we're going to focus on today is probably some of Elder Holland's teachings. His teachings about mothers and fathers, his teachings about parents, about children, and hopefully discover a little bit, once again, the type of dad that he was. So here's his daughter Mary saying that he's the type of father who carefully planned daddy-daughter activities he knew that she would enjoy, even though they might not be his preference. And I love that, Janie, because with our 7 daughters and 1 son, with our 7 daughters, I did a lot of things with them as they were growing up, but it was probably by my own admission, things that I wanted to do, like let's go golfing or let's go play this sport or let's go, unless it was a run, they would suggest that. But anyway, I admire Elder Holland, who would say to his daughter, let's do something you want to do, which I thought was great. And then his son David recalled the time of when the family was away. Elder Holland took several days out of his schedule for a one-on-one trip to southern Utah just to be with his son. And I wouldn't be surprised if this is when Elder Holland was the president of BYU and was just super busy, but would take that time with his son. And then when the family was moving from Provo up to the Bountiful area, Elder Holland is now a member of the Quorum of the 70. I think they probably still occupy the home down here in Provo at BYU, and so Elder Holland is driving an hour or more every day up to Bountiful and back, just so his son can go to school and football practices at his new school. There was a lot of father-son time in the car. They actually talk about that father and son time in the car on the Roots Tech video that we may refer to later. But I just admire him as a father and finding ways to spend time with his kids no matter how busy he was.
And then his son Matt, who we just talked about,
yeah,
he said that his fondest memories from his childhood were at the dinner table. So cool. Every night was a kind of family home evening filled with laughter, compliments, encouragement, interesting conversation, testimony, teaching, and expressions of love. You always knew Dad was happiest when he was at home with his family. What a great tribute to a father.
I think it's great, Janie, and it reminds me of your dad for sure. You could almost have said all the same things about your own dad as you saw that model growing up. And
again, a testimony to family dinners and to how important it is to gather the family at night and just to have that conversation to gather your family around.
I mean, no matter how busy the Hollands were, and they were busy. I mean, think about it. Elder Holland, when he was the president of BYU, was also what we would call today an Area Authority 70. So he was like basically a general authority in a way, meaning...
Probably traveling every weekend.
Yeah, state conferences every weekend and those kind of assignments. And then Sister Holland, a lot of people may not know this, but she was in the Young Women's General Presidency at that time. And so you just can't imagine how busy they were. But here they are, like you said, Janie, just finding a way to make sure that they had those family dinners and stay close as a family. Yeah. Here's what Elder Holland said about himself in an interview, Church News, April 1989. He says, "I do not have any hobbies except perhaps reading. My recreation, my rejuvenation, my refreshment in life comes from my family. I can come home tired at the end of a long day, and just after a few minutes with my family, I'm a new person again. I'm a family man, born and bred, tried and true. If I have a spare night, a free Saturday afternoon, Pat and I don't go out. We don't socialize. We don't join dinner groups. We spend that time with our children. And if I could get a car full of people for a social experience, I would choose my wife and 3 children, and no one would care when we got to our destination. All that would matter is that we were laughing, talking, and being together." And then he made this great comment: "I am first and forever a family man. I look at life through the eyes of my wife and children." I just think that says it all. Of course we're going to say more, but to me, that just says where his priorities were, what his focus was on, to call himself a family man and to say that his family rejuvenates him, and that if he could go anywhere in the world with anyone, it would be with his wife and his
children.
Kids. Yeah.
So one of my favorite talks that I wanted to really talk about today and emphasize, and probably because it's on my mind after having 2 brand new little grandbabies and watching my daughters and them go through this stage right now. But this favorite talk is called "Because She is a Mother." And Elder Holland just had a way of getting it. He understood. Even young mothers. And I want to just read a part of this talk and really encourage anyone who has daughters or are yourself in this stage, pull this talk up. It's so heartfelt.
Just read the whole thing.
It's just amazing. And Elder Holland just really nails it. But he said, "Today I wish to praise those motherly hands." This is going to be hard for me to get through.
I can help you.
"That have rocked the infant's cradle." Okay, I see I'm already a mess. "And through the righteousness taught to their children there, that are at the very center of the Lord's purpose for us in mortality. In speaking of mothers generally, I especially wish to praise and encourage young mothers. The work of a mother is hard, too often unheralded work. The young years are often those when either husband or wife or both may still be in school or in those earliest and leanest stages of developing the husband's breadwinning capacities. Finances fluctuate daily between low and non-existent. The apartment is usually decorated in one of 2 smart designs: Deseret Industries, Provincial, or Early Mother Hubbard."
We can remember that, can't we?
"The car, if there is one, runs on smooth tires and an empty tank, but with night feedings and night teethings, often the greatest challenge of all for a young mother is simply fatigue. Through these years, mothers go longer on less sleep and give more to others with less personal renewal for themselves than any other group." Sorry, I know this is close to home after just watching my 2 moms that just had these brand new babies. "I know at any other time in life, it is not surprising when the shadows under their eyes seem sometimes vaguely resemble the state of Rhode Island. Of course, the irony is that this is often the sister we want to call or need to call to service in the ward and stake auxiliaries. That's understandable. Who wouldn't want the exemplary influence of these young Loises and Eunices in the making? Everyone, be wise. Remember that families are the highest priority of all, especially in those formative years. Even so, young mothers will still find magnificent ways to serve faithfully in the church, even as others serve and strengthen them and their families in like manner. Do the best you can through these years, but whatever else you do, cherish that role that is so uniquely yours, and for which heaven itself sends angels to watch over you and your little ones. Husbands, especially husbands, as well as church leaders and friends in every direction, be helpful and sensitive and wise. Remember, to everything there is a season and a time to every purpose under the heaven." One young mother wrote to me recently that her anxieties tended to come from three fronts. One was that whenever she heard talks on LDS motherhood, she worried because she felt she didn't measure up or somehow wasn't going to be equal to the task. Secondly, she felt like the world expected her to teach her children reading, writing, interior design, Latin, calculus, and the internet, all before the baby said something terribly ordinary like goo goo. Thirdly, she often felt people were sometimes patronizing, almost always without meaning to be, because the advice she got or even the compliments she received seemed to reflect nothing of the mental investment, the spiritual and emotional exertion, the long night, long day, stretched to the limit demands that sometimes are required in trying to be and wanting to be the mother God hopes she will be. But one thing she says keeps her going through the thick and thin of this, and through the occasional tears of it all. I know deep down inside I am doing God's work. I know that in my motherhood I am in eternal partnership with Him. I am deeply moved that God finds His ultimate purpose and meaning in being a parent, even if some of His children make Him weep. In light of that kind of expression, it is clear that some of these Rhode Island-sized shadows come not just from diapers and carpooling, but from at least a few sleepless nights spent searching the soul, seeking earnestly for the capacity to raise these children, to be what God wants them to be. Moved by that kind of devotion and determination, may I say to mothers collectively, in the name of the Lord, you are magnificent. You are doing terrifically well. The very fact that you have been given such a responsibility is everlasting evidence of the trust your Father in heaven has in you. He knows that your giving birth to a child does not immediately propel you into the circle of the omniscient. If you and your husband will strive to love God and love the gospel yourself, if you will plead for that guidance and comfort of the Holy Spirit promised to the faithful, if you will go to the temple to both make and claim the promises of the most sacred covenants a woman and man can make in this world, if you will show others, including your children, the same caring, compassionate, forgiving heart you want heaven to show you, if you try your best to be the best parent you can be, you will have done all that a human being can do and all that God expects you to do.
You did it.
Got through it.
You did it, honey. I'm proud of you. But
feelings and emotions are a little too close to the surface.
Well, even that last line, for all of us, that, if you try your best and to be the best parent you can be, you will have done all that basically God expects you to do. I think that's so well said. And once again, who's ever said it like that? I mean, the way that Elder Holland says it, like you said, he has to know.
He just gets it and has a way of seeing it.
Yeah, I think that's great. Now, the talk called to the hands or the hands of the fathers maybe has a little bit different, a different tone. Here's what he says. And once again, another great talk. Here I am, Janie, in my doctoral program. I'm studying fathers, and Fatherless America was a book that had just come out by David Blankenhorn. And so I love that our leaders are so plugged in to the social issues of the day. And here Elder Holland is going to quote and talk about a book that I was studying as a doctoral student. Here's what he said. As a father, I wonder if I and all the other fathers could do more to build a sweeter, stronger relationship with our sons and daughters here on the earth. Dads, is it too bold to hope that our children might have some small portion of the feeling for us that the divine Son felt for his Father? Might we earn more of that love by trying to be more of what God was to his child? In any case, we do know that a young person's developing concept of God centers on characteristics observed in that child's earthly parents. Stop, time out. Awesome, right? I mean, Janie, you've taught me that. We've talked about that a lot, that our own fathers and mothers often in our minds become kind of like templates, or the way that we view God, right? We view God, or Heavenly Father, or Heavenly Parents through the lens of our own parents. And, if those parents are strict or unloving or unkind, we tend to think of God that way, and what a great compliment to be able to say, you know what, I know that Heavenly Father is loving and kind and merciful because that's how my dad is, or that's how my mom is, For that reason and many others, Elder Holland said, I suppose no book I read in recent months has alarmed me more than the work entitled Fatherless America. In this study, the author speaks of fatherlessness as the most harmful demographic trend of this generation, the leading cause of damage to children. He is convinced, the entire engine driving our most urgent social problems, from poverty to crime, to adolescent pregnancy, to child abuse, to domestic violence. Among the principal social issues of our time is the flight of fathers from their children's lives. Or even greater concern than the physical absenteeism of some fathers is the spiritually or emotionally absent father. These are fatherly sins of omission that are probably more destructive than sins of commission. Why are we not surprised that when 2,000 children of all ages and backgrounds were asked what they appreciated most about their fathers, they answered universally, "He spends time with me." A young Laurel I met on a conference assignment not long ago wrote me after our visit and said, "I wish my dad knew how much I need him spiritually and emotionally. I crave any kind of comment, any warm personal gesture. I don't think he knows how much it would mean to me to have him take an active interest in what's going on in my life, to offer to give me a blessing or just spend some time together. I know he worries that he won't do the right thing or won't say the words well, but just have him try would mean more than he could ever know. I don't want to sound ungrateful because I know he loves me. He sent me a note once and signed it, 'Love, Dad,' and I treasure that note. I hold it among my dearest possessions." And once again, here's Elder Holland teaching us in a way how to be good dads without even hardly saying anything other than just telling that story. And for those of us that heard it, we're like, oh boy, do I want to make sure I'm doing better. And then he said this, "And brethren, even when we are not the best of men, even in our limitations and inadequacy, we can keep making our way in the right direction because of the encouraging teaching set forth by a divine Father and demonstrated by a divine Son. With Heavenly Father's help, we can leave more of a parental legacy than we suppose." One new father wrote this. He said, "Often as I watch my son watch me, I am taken back to moments with my own dad, remembering how vividly I wanted to be just like him. I remember having a plastic razor and my own can of foam shaving cream, and each morning I would shave when he shaved. I remember following his footsteps back and forth across the grass as he mowed the lawn in the summer. Now I want my son to follow my lead, and yet it terrifies me to know he probably will. Holding this little boy in my arms, I feel a heavenly homesickness, a longing to love the way God loves, to comfort the way he comforts, and to protect in the way that he protects. The answer to all the fears of my youth was always, what would Dad do? Now that I have a child to raise, I am counting on Heavenly Father to tell me exactly that." And I'm taking a time out here and breaking just out of that talk for a minute to just make this point. But when I was in that doctoral program in the late 90s, one of the movements, one of the narratives was that fathers aren't necessary, that we don't need dads. And Elder Holland I just love it when the prophets are addressing those issues. And here he is, without saying, I'm addressing that. Listen to what he says. At a vulnerable moment in young Nephi's life, his prophetic future was determined when he said, "I did believe all the words which have been spoken by my father." At the turning point of the prophet Enos's life, he said, "It was the words which I had often heard my father speak which prompted one of the great revelations recorded in the Book of Mormon." And the sorrowing Alma the Younger, when confronted by the excruciating memory of his sins, remembered also to have heard his father prophesy concerning the coming of Jesus Christ, a Son of God, to atone for the sins of the world. That brief memory, that personal testimony offered by his father at a time when the father may have felt nothing was sinking in, not only saved the spiritual life of his son, but changed forever the history of the Book of Mormon and those people. So once again, just in a subtle way, helping us understand how crucial fathers can be by the things that they teach, by the things that they say, and how they live their lives, their examples. And we may not think it dads, but they're watching, and they're watching us close, and they're taking notes. And they're going to remember some of these things. And hopefully they're the good things that we're teaching our children.
And even if you weren't raised by a dad who exemplified all these incredible attributes, Mark, like I give you tribute that you kind of came from a background like that, but you had the desire to become that. Because you didn't have that.
Right.
And you've become like this incredible dad that literally is loving and in tune, and kind of by watching other people, by studying, by reading, you became the dad that you didn't have. And I really admire that and give tribute to parents that can overcome that, even though you didn't have that growing up, that can then turn around and change the cycle, and then give that to your own children. I just think that's such a...
Thank you, honey. You were my inspiration. And really true. I mean, you've taught me a lot about how to be a good dad and father because you had a good father in your life. But once again, we can turn to these apostles and these leaders that can help us so much as well. And here's Elder Holland helping us here. So that leads us to a next message. Janie, I remember years ago, you and I were visiting family. We were up here in Utah, and you had gone to a Sunday school class. We had a long discussion about this, but you may not even remember this, but for whatever reason, it stuck out to me. And that was that there was a father who was the Sunday school teacher, and in that Sunday school class was his daughter. And it was almost like they got in a discussion. I don't want to say an argument, but it was kind of a discussion on who was like the worst. Like who was, and they were both kind of trying to claim that they were, no, I don't go to church that much at all. No, I go to church a lot less than you, or I watch these kind of movies or whatever. But it was kind of this, almost this bragging moment of who could be the worst. And I just remember thinking when you told that story, how's that going to turn out? What's that going to look like 5 or 6 years from now? For a daughter who's thinking, I'm pretty wicked, but my dad thinks he's even more wicked, and here he is teaching this Sunday school class, no telling how many kids that he was influencing in such a negative way. By the way, that becomes another whole story of, as a bishop, I just refuse to let anyone teach our youth who I felt that they had a chance to pull them away from the gospel, even a fraction of a
or to even
inch.
Plant any negative seeds.
To plant,
whatsoever.
just we can't have you with it. There's other things you can do, but we just can't have you pulling our youth away. But anyway, that's another story. But the point of that, Janie, is that when that experience happened, and when you came home and kind of are told your experience, this talk had just been given, and I just thought of that as you shared it, and I think it's great.
So the talk that Mark's referencing is called A Prayer for the Children. And again, I mean, we could probably say that about every talk of Elder Holland's, that this is one of his landmark greatest talk, but we can't. They're all that way. But this was one that we've really relied on a lot in our, as we've raised our children. And it's just beautiful. Again, A Prayer for the Children. If you want to pull this up, it's just an incredible talk for families. But he said, he really lays it out there and invites parents to really step it up, like raise the bar. He says, in offering such a prayer for the young, may I address a rather specific aspect for their safety. In this, I speak carefully and lovingly to any of the adults of the church, parents or otherwise, who may be given to cynicism or skepticism, who in matters of whole soul devotion always seem to hang back a little, who at the church's doctrinal campsite always like to pitch their tents out on the periphery of religious faith. To all such whom we do love and wish you were more comfortable camping nearer to us, I say, please be aware that the full price to be paid for such a stance does not always come due in your lifetime. No, sadly, he says, some elements of this can be kind of profligate national debt, with payments coming out of your children's and grandchildren's pockets in far more expensive ways than you ever intended it to be.
Wow.
And it just from then to now, don't you think that that's just increased?
Just has spiraled kind of more out of control.
I
mean, that is one of the things in our stake. We just talked about it in our state council meeting yesterday of many members of our state council just worried that they just don't see a lot of parents just really being actively involved in teaching their children the gospel, or even teaching their children much of anything, or being involved in their lives. They're just kind of worried that parents are kind of asleep at the wheel. And I think Elder Holland's kind of talking about that, but he's going to get a little bit more doctrinal here as he says this. He says, parents simply cannot flirt with skepticism or cynicism and then be surprised when their children expand that flirtation into full-blown romance. If in matters of faith and belief, children are at risk of being swept downstream by this intellectual current or that cultural rapid, we as their parents must be more certain than ever to hold to anchored, unmistakable moorings clearly recognizable to those of our own household. It won't help anyone if we go over the edge with them, explaining through the roar of the falls all the way down that we really did know that the church was true and that the keys of the priesthood really were lodged there, but we just didn't want to stifle anyone's freedom to think otherwise. No, we can hardly expect the children to get to shore safely if the parents don't seem to know where to anchor their own boat. Isn't that such a great metaphor,
You know, it's so sad these days, Mark. Sorry to interrupt you, but I was listening to an interview of a kid yesterday. He's just 18, but grew up in the church. About the time he hit about 16, he just started getting a lot of anti things coming through his feed,
Yeah.
and as he'd scroll, it would just show up. And at first he just kind of dismissed it as garbage, but he would start reading the comments, and even in the comments, even in the pro LDS reels and things, there would be anti comments that he would start reading, and it just started affecting him. And he started looking up things that that people would point out, and he started reading things and really got involved in a ton of anti-Mormon literature and became so overwhelmed and really started doubting the church. And he never told his parents, never, he just would research things on his own. And he wasn't researching good things. He was researching the anti-Mormon literature. And finally, by the time that he got to the point where he was totally out and totally just didn't believe the church at all, and was to the point he didn't even believe in God, he finally then went and talked to his bishop, who didn't help him much, and to the bishop's credit, he also didn't disclose how far gone down the path he was.
Yeah.
And then he finally, a few months after that, kind of told his parents, I'm having doubts, but it didn't disclose that he was literally like totally out. And then started going to different churches. Anyway, long story short, he had his incredible spiritual experience that were kind of set him straight a little bit. And then he had the thought, I need to read pro LDS literature, because he'd pray and he'd do all the things he thought to get an answer.
Yeah.
And but he was asking, but with a real he wasn't in the right headspace, in the right heart space.
Yeah.
But he finally started asking the right questions and talking to the right people and reading the right books, and then built his testimony totally back. But I'm just saying, we need to know where our kids are. I mean, these parents, these youth leaders
were out.
just were not, had no idea where their child for 2 years didn't know that he was going down this path of total, being against the church and losing his testimony daily just by the things he was seeing online. And so parents, we have got to know where our kids are. We've got to be teaching constantly. We've got to be teaching them how to find the answers for themselves, what the Spirit feels like and where it doesn't. And,
but think of how cool it could have been if there was a relationship where he could have gone to his parents and said, "Hey, Mom and Dad, I'm seeing and hearing some stuff that's really concerning to me. Could I share it with you?" And to have some good parents to sit and listen and absorb that, and then people say, "Okay, here's how to deal with that," or "Here's what the answer to that is."
Yeah.
And then Elder Holland said this. He said, "I think some parents may not understand that even when they feel secure in their own minds regarding matters of personal testimony, they can nevertheless make that faith too difficult for their children to detect." And Janie, I know you and I have talked about that. We've used that phrase over the years, that we can never make our faith too difficult to detect for our children, but also for our grandchildren, right? And I love this. He says, we can be reasonably active, meeting, going Latter-day Saints, but if we do not live lives of gospel integrity and convey to our children powerful, heartfelt convictions regarding the truthfulness of the restoration and the divine guidance of the church from the first vision to this very hour, then those children may, to our regret, but not surprise, turn out not to be visibly active, meeting, going Latter-day Saints, or sometimes anything close to it. So look at the consequences for making our faith difficult to detect. And you and I have had that discussion before of how grandparents also need to make it so that their faith is not difficult to detect. I remember talking to one of our general authorities a few years ago who said that, because I think there's so many grandparents out there in the church, their grandchildren don't even know they're members of the church because there is so much time devoted to having fun that the gospel never really comes up.
Yeah, and here's a great example that Elder and Sister Holland used, is they said they met a fine young man who they came in contact with after he'd been roaming around through the occult and sorting through a variety of Eastern religions, all in an attempt to find religious faith. His father, he admitted, believed in nothing whatsoever, but his grandfather, the boy said, was actually a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, but he didn't do much with it, the young man said. He was always pretty cynical about the church. And from a grandfather who was cynical to a son who was agnostic to then now a grandson who is now desperately looking for the God and for truth, for something his family had already had at one point.
Right.
He said, what a classic example of the warning Elder Richard L. Evans gave, when he said, sometimes some parents mistakenly feel that they can relax a little as to conduct and conformity, or take perhaps a so-called liberal view of basic and fundamental things, thinking that a little laxness or indulgence won't matter, that they may fail to teach or to attend church, or maybe voice critical views of the church. Some parents seem to feel that they can ease up a little on the fundamentals without affecting their family or their family's future. But, he observed, if a parent goes a little off course, the children are likely to exceed the parent's example.
And how many times have we seen that in our lifetime? Oh, my
goodness. Over and over and over.
And by the way, Janie, it's been really funny to me to watch how so many people, and I would say maybe Elder Holland's last 5 years, have almost been offended of how strong he was on a couple of things, especially a talk he gave at BYU. And I just look back and think, guys, that's nothing. That's nothing. You don't know the Elder Holland of the 1980s or 90s or even the 2000s when, the word fire that our kids like to use when something's amazing and strong and powerful, he was fire. And check this out. Listen to this quote. To lead a child or anyone else's, this is where that comes from in my world, even inadvertently away from faithfulness, away from loyalty and bedrock belief simply because we want to be clever or independent is license no parent nor any other person has ever been given. I mean, talk about strong, right? And in matters of religion, a skeptical mind is not a higher manifestation of virtue than is a believing heart. And analytical deconstruction in the field of, say, literary fiction can be just plain old-fashioned destruction when transferred to families yearning for faith at home. So, wow, talk about fire, laying it down right there. No one has licensed to lead anyone away from the church. No one has ever given you that permission.
Or destroy someone's faith, yeah.
I love that about him.
So to kind of wrap this talk up that Elder Holland gave, he gives these great 5 points that I think we all need to re-emphasize in our families. But the first one is live the gospel as conspicuously as you can. Parents, we need to tell our kids when we go to the temple, we need to let them know we're serving. We need to let them know what we learned in class that day, what we studied.
Share our excitement for the gospel, right?
What we studied in Come Follow Me personally, or
what we learned.
Right, of revelation we have. We need to open our mouth and share and live it. Mm-hmm. Not just for our children, but for everyone around us, I think. Number 2 is keep the covenants that your children know that you have made. I love that. They can see...
Randall Wright's quote, they can spot a hypocrite a mile away.
A mile away. So we need to keep our covenants that they know that we have made. Number 3, give priesthood blessings. That so many times I think that we go through hard things in our life without that added measure that, dads and grandfathers and priesthood leaders, don't be afraid to give priesthood blessings generously.
Maybe on that one, Janie, I can say that you've been such a great influence in my life to say, have you done that? Or you should give them a blessing, because I think a lot of us as men, we think that, but we don't want to impose ourselves on anyone. But then when our wives say, no, you need to do that, it's like, okay, let's go. So thank you in other words, wives, you can have a great impact on that with your husbands.
Yes. And number 4, bear your testimony. And that doesn't have to be stand up in church once a month and say, I need to talk to my children. Mm-hmm. We can do that in the car. We can do that at the dinner table. It doesn't have to be formal, like, I'd like to bear my testimony. We can just talk of things that we know to be true and that we believe in our hearts.
Right.
And then 5, don't assume that our children will somehow get the drifts of their beliefs on their own.
Like our beliefs.
Yeah, it doesn't just happen. It's not through osmosis. We need to formally teach, but we also need to informally teach. We always need to be teaching. We always need to be talking. We always need to be seeing where they're at and what their beliefs are and what they're feeling, what they're learning.
And I do think, Janie, that's right. I think we've even learned that assuming that our children have learned something because we've talked about it, and it doesn't always sink in, and it does have to be repeated and
over and over and over. And we even realized with 8 children, that things that we thought we had talked to the older kids maybe didn't trickle down to the younger kids. And so we felt like we were always like, oh, did we not teach that? We
probably got to cover that.
Yeah, we got to start over on the basics because I don't know who's getting what.
Right. Here's Elder Holland. He said, the prophet Nephi said near the end of his life that they had written their record of Christ and preserved their convictions regarding his gospel in order to, quote, persuade our children that our children may know and believe the right way. And so he talks about this deliberate act of teaching, which we talked about in our last podcast. And so the last piece of counsel, I think, is just classic. It's embedded in the talk. I've kind of made it into 5 points, although it's just one big long paragraph. I'll read this first one. He says, Nephi-like, might we ask ourselves what our children know from us personally? Number 1, do our children know that we love the scriptures? Do they see us reading them and marking them and clinging to them in daily life?
Number 2, have our children ever unexpectedly opened a closed door and found us on our knees in prayer? Have they heard us not only pray with them, but also pray for them out of nothing more than the sheer parental love?
Number 3, do our children know we believe in fasting as something more than just an obligatory first Sunday of the month hardship? Do they know that we have fasted for them and for their future on days about which they knew nothing?
Do they know we love being in the temple, not least because it provides a bond to them that neither death nor the legions of hell can break?
And then the last one, do they know we love and sustain local and general leaders, imperfect as they are, for their willingness to accept callings they did not seek in order to preserve a standard of righteousness they did not create?
And number 6, do those children know that we love God with all of our heart and that we long to see the face and fall at the feet of his only begotten Son? I pray that they know this. That's what he says, how he ends.
So good, right? It's so good. And so once again, and by the way, there are so many more things we could talk about. There's other talks and messages, and maybe we will at some point. But boy, Elder Holland said a lot about parenthood. And that was my observation, is that he said a lot more about families and parenting and marriage than I ever realized.
And I love going back, what you're talking about is the quote from Nephi about we talk of Christ, we write of Christ to persuade our children. And I think that's such a powerful word. Yeah. That's what we have to be doing, is persuading them, teaching them constantly, because they're getting so much garbage online, on the internet, constantly.
At school all day.
Even if they're getting the good, real, like this kid I was telling you about earlier, even if they're seeing the good posts about the church, they're also seeing the comments that are so negative and anti towards the church, which are planting seeds in their head. We don't know where, but for the hours they're spending online and hearing the anti stuff, we have to be constantly teaching, persuading for them to come unto Christ.
Yeah, amen. I love that. So once again, kind of going back to the beginning of how we kind of talked about this, but one of my favorite things about Elder Holland is just what he taught me and how he taught me to be a good parent. Just not just from his teachings, but of course from his example and the stories we've heard over time of what a good father he was. But I'm really grateful for him because, Janie, that his passing has caused us to go back and look at some of these messages that he shared over time, and man, are they good. They're so good and so helpful and inspirational.
Thank you for being with us today as we kind of reminisce through all these incredible talks. And our LDS today, as we close, let's do something. Choose one of these talks, that if you need to hear the motherhood one, if you need to hear the fatherhood talk, if you need to hear this one that's called A Prayer for the Children. Again, it's General Conference, April 2003. It's just an incredible talk that just really hits all aspect of family life and our importance to teach our children. But pick one of these talks and read it or listen to it on YouTube. That's our LDS for the week.
Yeah.
Just so inspiring. Nobody can talk and teach and inspire like Elder Holland.
I know, we miss him. Yeah, so we offer that to everyone, and you'll be inspired to know you'll find the one thing that, you need to maybe work on or improve on, and that's perfect. Everyone, we'll see you next time. Thanks for being with us. We hope you have a wonderful, awesome week.